This podcast is a proud member of PodNation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The drifters hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Journey with the cinephile, unseen, unseen. The veils twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 317. I am your host, David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So for this episode here for you is going to be my winter year-end kind of roundup thing here, number 26. As my two featured reviews doesn't actually make the greatest double feature, but I have Keeper and Winterbeast. So the latter one I was hoping would be kind of a winter-themed horror film, as I'm starting to move into December here, of course. But what it actually does very well is that we have two isolated settings where the first one, Keeper, takes place in a cabin where we have a limited cast. Winterbeast takes place in a small little town that is kind of close to the mountains here, where there's some like trails and everything like that. So that's where it does make an interesting little double feature. So then for mini reviews here, I have my Voyage to the Fives rewatch from 1995 of Blood and Donuts. I have a couple of screeners here. One is Manor of Darkness, the other one is Lonely Legend. I gave a rewatch to The Long Walk, which is a 2025 release, and then I have a documentary here of The House in Between Two, and then one episode of Welcome to Derry. So I don't think there's anything else to do here then for this intro outside of saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me. And for my first mini review here is going to be Blood and Donuts from 1995. This is directed by Holly Dale, written by Andrew Rye Beersons. Now, this is starring Gordon Curry, Louis Faria, and Helena Clarkson. This is a comedy horror film from, I believe this is from Canada. Yeah. Currently sitting on a 5.9 on IMDb and a 3.0 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: a vampire falls for a woman working at a donut shop. So this is one I had no idea about until reading through the Horror Show Guide Encyclopedia. I watched it a few years ago. The only thing that stuck with me was that it starred Curry, who I knew from like Puppet Master 4 and 5, as well as being a low-budget vampire film. I was intrigued to give this a rewatch here for my voyage to the Fives. So I'm going to go ahead and start is by saying that our vampire here is Boya, portrayed by Curry, and then the woman he kind of falls for a little bit here is Molly, portrayed by Clarkson. She actually works at the donut shop, and then we have Earl, portrayed by Faria, who is a troubled cab driver. So we have a few sets here. I love the idea of this small slum-like area where this creature who lived here about 25 years before, is probably a whole different time period, or a whole different type of place before he, went to sleep, and now where it is now. Which is in this time frame is that when he woke up, it's a bit of a time capsule, but there haven't been that many technological advances. It's kind of interesting that if this would have came out a few years later, it would have been a whole different type of thing. So now that it's set up, we have a basic premise. We have this rough area. The crime boss, who has his two cronies, are going out to collect a debt. That crime boss is played by the amazing David Cronenberg. And his two cronies are Pierce, portrayed by Frank Moore, and Axel, portrayed by Hanley Kay. So what we end up here from there is that they're using Earl as a driver. He gets spooked and flees. His life is increasingly in danger for the decisions he makes. And he's, he's got to try to find a place to stay and everything like that. So So Molly fears for Earl, but due to his choices, there isn't much that she can do to help. It's an intriguing dynamic that grows when Boya wakes up. So let characters where I'll go next. It's noteworthy, like I said, that he's been asleep for 25 years. The world hasn't drastically changed, but his love interest, Rita, has still been waiting. She's portrayed by Fiona Reed. It's a coincidence that he woke up early like he did because of a golf ball being hit through a window and it ends up knocking where he was sleeping and everything like that. So Boya does appear to be heartless in love, but he's a good person for defending Earl. We have this bat scene where I actually kind of realized how muscular that Curry was in that. But I think he's as solid as a suitable, like aloof lead vampire. So the themes that we also get explored here is like Voya's vampire nature. He's lonely, cursed with immortality, and searching for connection. He finds friendship with Earl and love with Molly. He also found love the first time with people through Rita. His extended life makes him indifferent to human aging, which Rita resents. Her being rejected also factors in. Boya is largely a humanist, feeding on animals and seeking to protect those that he cares about. Let's then shift over to talking about the actor performances. This has an amateur 1990s indie feel. Curry plays a humanist vampire, and Ferreira, known from like Dawn of the Dead remake, is fine despite a poorly executed New York, New Jersey accent. Clarkson is his level-headed donut shop worker, and Reed is the resentful former lover. The cast is rounded out by Carol as the shop owner, and that would be Jay Winston Carroll, as well as like Moore Kay as the bumbling henchman aiming for comedy. I enjoyed Cronenberg's cameo as well. All it's left to be the filmmaking aspects. Despite the low budget, the cinematography and framing are fine. With mostly real locations, though the donut shop felt staged, it effectively captured the setting. Limited but good effects were used, and the change in Boya when he goes feral was enjoyable. The soundtrack effectively used some big songs and fitting background music to invoke the past. So in conclusion, this is an intriguing low-budget vampire film that offers a unique take on the immortal curse through the character of Boya. I appreciated the film's gritty setting, the interesting time frame of Boya's slumber, and the blend of genres, despite its amateur indie feel. With the performances are generally solid, particularly Curry's suitably aloof vampire. The film's core strength lies in the thematic exploration of loneliness, the search for connection, and the indifference of immortality. Ultimately, Blood and Donuts serves as a solid, if flawed, cult entry into the vampire subgenre. So my rating here for Blood and Donuts, I'm going to give this one a 5.5 out of 10 after the second time around. And then up next here for mini review, I have Manor of Darkness from 2025, written and directed by Blake Ritter. This stars Kim Spearman, Lewis James, and Sarah Alexandria Marks. This is a horror film that is from the United Kingdom. Now, it's not able to be rated yet on IMDb, and I believe over on Letterboxd, we're looking at about a 2 to a 1.5 star movie over there, with the synopsis being a group of pretend filmmakers are stuck in a never-ending nightmare at the Manor. So this is a film I got the chance to see thanks to Annalise from Strike Media when she sent the press release and the screener. Now, when I saw this was going to be a horror film that featured time loop and also being a 2025 release, that was enough for me to agree to see this one. It also helps when this is rounding out my end of year list with some independent works. Other than that information, I did come into this one blind. So where I'm going to end up starting here is by saying that I'm a fan of the premise. It starts off with something like a haunted house, and the reason to get our characters there worked. It also feels a bit convoluted and a variation on other films, but I like how this has its own unique way for the version. There are some holes with logic, and I also think that it loses its way in presenting the story elements. I'm going to go ahead and start those with our group. It's interesting to see that we have Chris here, who is portrayed by Lewis James, and I think he's a professional thief. We end up meeting his sister, who is portrayed by, or is Lisa, who is, or this is his girlfriend, sorry, is portrayed by Marks, and we aren't told how. She is down to help. And then Laura is his sister, and she helped with a heist where things kind of went bad, and she is portrayed by Spearman. Now, she works at a coffee shop where her hours are just getting cut. That and their mother being sick forces her to help. So the Lisa element is a stretch, but I could see being sweet-talked into this, even though there seems she's more logical than Chris at times. So these things do kind of work, even if I do have some slight hangups. Now, a problem that I have here is that we have this character of Andy who is being recruited, and he's portrayed by Rui Zhang. Now, it doesn't make sense that Chris is worried about reaching out to his old crew. One is doing time or was recently arrested, another has a family. I don't recall if there was an indicator that he knew Andy before recruiting him. I do like that Andy's backstory as to why he's doing this crime. I'd also say that Shang works in his role. I like even that his character does when they're trapped. I just don't buy the information that we're given from him while we're there. Now, something else is underdeveloped for me is what is happening within this manor. I love the idea that we have these shady things that are happening. I feel bad for Lucas, who is the guy who is trying to get this documentary film crew there. He's portrayed by Stuart Wolf Murray. I feel bad, like I was saying, and what happens to create the curse for him. The idea of bringing in this crew works. This could mean problems, but I also just kind of felt the entity was lacking depth. I was tired while watching this, and I lost interest late in the second act. The concept, as it creates a time loop and the characters keep reliving things, is good. Just a bit more there was as to why would help me connect everything. So the last aspect of the story will be the time loops themselves. This is a difficult thing to use, in my opinion. One of the biggest problems is that you need to have stakes. I don't recall there being any here. Now, something that is used well in the film Until Dawn, or was introduced in Happy Death Day, but then the longer that goes on, they kind of just ignore it, is there has to be a reason as you keep reliving these things, as to, like, an example here is Until Dawn is that as you get injuries inflicted on you, the more that happens, the more that it changes you, and it actually has long-term effects. This just seems that the longer you're here, it just kind of drives you insane. What I will give credit for is that the curse is broken, and the people that were killed, if you break it then, you're stuck that way. Other than that, this falls short. Let's then shift over to discussing the filmmaking aspects in general. I'd say this is made well enough. The cinematography and framing were solid. It's able to capture how big this manor is. They do some good things with the scare here as well. We have a solid practical effects that are used when people are killed. I just don't recall there being that much on screen. I think we're kind of seeing the after effects. The editing helps as well. My issue is that the CGI doesn't necessarily hold up. I did notice, but since it's a lower budget, I'm not going to hold it against it too much. Other than that, the music fit without necessarily standing out. All it's left them to be the acting performances. I like Spearman. I've seen her in one other film, and she's been in solid in both. She has a good look about her. How she gets involved makes sense. James also works in his role. My issue comes with the writing, with the logic of choices that are being made. Marks is also solid. What's funny is that she seems more level-headed than you'd expect, and I did like that. I've already said that Shang worked in his role. Again, my issue comes from guessing is the writing. Other than that, Wolf Stewart and the rest of the cast I thought worked as well for what was kind of needed there at times. In conclusion, this offers an intriguing premise, blending a haunted house narrative with time loop concept, and succeeds in creating visually solid, lower budget horror experience. The film's core concept, a curse trapping the main cast, especially Spearman and Marks, works. However, the narrative is hindered by logical gaps such as Andy's hasty inclusion, a shallow explanation of the manor's entity, and an unclear time loop stakes. Good cinematography and practical effects were undercut by underdeveloped story elements and weak CGI, leaving it a functional independent horror film that fails to fully utilize its ambitious potential. So my rating here then for Manor of Darkness, I give this one a 6 out of 10. And this should be hitting or getting released here on December 9th if you, so right around the time, like not too long after this podcast gets dropped. And then up next here is one that I got to check out as a screener as well, of Lonely Legend from 2025. This is written, directed, and starring Noah. This also has Ariel Vargas and Kev Nivik that star in this one. So this one doesn't actually have an IMDb page, but does have a Letterboxd page. I would say this is kind of like a horror, psychological drama type thing that we're getting here. This is from the United States, and not enough, since there isn't an IMDb page, I can't give you that. And then I'm the only person I believe who has seen this according to Letterboxd. But the synopsis: a serial killer pours his heart out to his loved ones, wanting acceptance. When it isn't given, he plunges deeper into insanity and depression. So this one I got the chance to see when our writer, director here, and star reached out to see if I'd be interested. I had met him after a movie at the Gateway Film Center. I know it was like a Hollywood something or another with a zip code thing. We chatted a bit. He is quite the character and a genuinely nice guy. So when I found out he made a movie, I wanted to lend my support and review it here. And this one, for the most part, I would say we're following a character named Impervious. I believe his real name might be Brent, portrayed by Noah. We're kind of seeing him just go to a bunch of different locations, kind of mess around, do some things like that. And then where I'll go from there is that it's interesting that he selected Impervious as the name of this killer. He wears a mask and like a wig, and I know that the word tends to mean something in line with like invincibility. Our character seems far from that. Noah does a great job at bringing emotions to this role. He goes from like anger to sadness and everything in between. I'll give him credit for that. Now, for most of this, I did consider the alternative that he actually isn't a killer, or he's not actually impervious. We do hear on this like radio about people being affected by this killer, and it also has its effects on him. He kind of does it because his father seems to be a serial killer, and he is trying to live up to expectations there. So he has orphaned some of these people, so that's part of it. And there's also like a YouTube or like an alternate like live stream discussing him, that at least a video of something that was supposed to be recent. And they're kind of questioning if the killer is real or if this is an imposter. I started to question, since the hosts aren't necessarily sure if these are new killings or like, you know, the same thing done by this or the original person, or is this a copycat. I do like instill in the doubt that he is either isn't him trying to emulate, or he's just gotten older and time has been in between his last spree. So since we have a limited story, I want to shift over to talk about what carries this, and that would be the filmmaking techniques. We have some great cinematography and framing. The use of locations deserves credit, as is the black and white aesthetic and the impervious mask. Due to limited budget, this focuses more on the psychological look of the killer rather than the exploitative acts, which keeps me, the audience, questioning the lead's reliability. The music is generally solid, though there's some selections that kind of made me question, but that's also more of like a matter of like a personal preference. Also, then to be the acting performances. This is limited since we're mostly following Noah. He does well in carrying this and showing a range of emotions. I'll say once more here that this is a roller coaster as he deals with the trauma that he is talking about, also being ignored by those that he reaches out to. I wouldn't be shocked to learn of some true personal experiences that are helped, bring in realism here. The rest of the cast pushes to where this ends up. In conclusion, this succeeds as a challenging and deeply psychological character study, offering a unique look into the mind of a fractured individual. While the limited narrative and the budget necessitate a focus on introspective action, or I guess overaction, Noah's commitment as writer, director, and star elevates the material, delivering an emotionally complex performance that drives the entire experience. It's a raw, unsettling exploration of familial rejection and instability, framed by thoughtful filmmaking choices that utilize the black and white aesthetic and sound design. This is powerful, if difficult, film that rewards viewers interested in psychological horror and compelling character work. So my rating here for Lonely Legend is going to be a 5.5 out of 10, and this is on YouTube if you are curious. And I'm going to go a little bit brief here because I've already covered this on the show. It's going to be The Long Walk from 2025. This is directed by Francis Lawrence. It was written by J.T. Molnar. And, of course, from the novella written by, I guess it's technically as a novel, but it was done by Richard Bachman, but this is actually Stephen King's pseudonym. This is starring Cooper Hoffman, David Johnson, and Garrett Waring. This is a dystopian sci-fi, psychological, survival, teen horror thriller film that is from, I think this is a co-production, just want to double check before yes, it's going to be United States and Canada. This is currently sitting on a 6.8 on IMDb and a 3.6 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being: a group of teenage boys compete in a annual contest known as the Long Walk, in which they must maintain a certain walking speed or get shot. So this one, if you'd like to hear a featured review, is going to be episode 307, which was Voyage Through the Fives, number 22. I had this paired up with the Jungle Captive. The only thing I can kind of say there for the through line would be that both are looking at kind of psychological things with main characters and everything like that. So then this one here, you have a group of teenage boys who are forced to compete in the Long Walk, an annual contest where they must maintain a walking speed of 3 miles an hour and be executed, with the goal of only having one survivor. So the rules here, the competitors are selected, one male from each state. They receive a warning if their speed drops below that 3 miles per hour. 3 warnings lead to an execution. Walking for an hour removes a warning. Stepping off the road is an automatic killing, and the winner receives money and one wish. The event is ran by the Major, who is actually portrayed by Mark Hamill. So this one explores the themes of like male vulnerability, the loss of innocence, and human nature. So this is a character study of our competitors. The dystopian setting feels Orwellian, as a civil war resulted in a fascist government taking over. This is a kind of way of kind of instilling that American pride and getting everything kind of back on track and whatnot. I'll kind of run through some of the characters here. Raymond Garrett is portrayed by Hoffman. He's the lead who unknowingly is kind of mirroring some of his father's mistakes, so that was a good little twist there, a good little thing they kind of included. We have Peter McVries, portrayed by Johnson. He befriends Garrity. He has a difficult past that gives him a unique appreciation for life. We have Stebbins, portrayed by Waring, who is the favorite to win. We have Gary Barkovich, portrayed by Charlie Plummer. He's a character who likes to push buttons, and then when things kind of happen, it makes him kind of inverted and trying to kind of introverted way of kind of looking at things. We have the Major, like I said, the stoic villainous runner of the game. We have Ginny Garrity, portrayed by Judy Greer. She is Garrity's visibly upset mother. William Garrity is portrayed by Josh Hamilton. This is the father who he was showing kind of forbidden art to his son, and it's something that is against the rules and everything like that. That's where it kind of gets almost like 1984. I thought that was good. We also have Arthur Baker, portrayed by Tut Nuit, who walks in the group with Garrity and McVries. They are the Musketeers. We also have Hank Olson, portrayed by Ben Wang, walks in the group and with our main characters as well. So for the writing here, I think that Molnar does a good job at subtly introducing the world without heavy-handed commentary. I didn't necessarily realize this is actually supposed to be taking place back in the 1970s, more back when it was written. We have this morbid game that the nation watches. There was some financial ruin by war, of course, so it's using it to reduce population as well as inspire citizens, and also that morbid curiosity to see public executions. Think that Francis Lawrence as our director has a stark direction and brutal, realistic portrayal of death is well noted as well. That's another kind of thing, is that you can't stop it. So these people are kind of flirting with death in order to kind of make their social situation better. I think the cinematography does well at capturing the bleak Midwestern setting. It's kind of drab, flat, and lacking color. The effective sound design and fitting music enhance the tone and atmosphere. So for me, I rather enjoyed this one. I do think this kind of solidifies itself for me and what I have it, as I am now have solidified that I give this one an 8.5 out of 10. Would definitely recommend give this one a watch if you haven't yet. It's going to be one of the, not necessarily probably my top contender for my end of year list, but it's definitely going to be kind of back end of the top 5. Then up next, I have a documentary here of The House in Between Two. This is from 2022. It is directed between Steve Gonsalves and Kendall Welpton. This features Sam Bellatrusis, Aaron Brown, and Amy Dullard. This is a documentary horror sci-fi film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 4.3 on IMDb and a 3.0 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being. Follow the most haunted house in the United States and the fight of Alice and her paranormal work team so that she can return home. Who or what haunts Alice's house? So I decided to give this one a watch. This is obviously part 2, streaming on Tubi. So I thought the first one was interesting enough. This was one that I put on later in the workday, and what's good here is there's kind of building on the first part where our directors here of Gonsalves and Welpton as they continue to help this homeowner of Alice Jackson. So what I find interesting here is that we get kind of like psychics, mediums, and even like a geophysicist to come and examine the house. This includes Bellatrusis, Laurie McDonald, Jill Morris, Carolyn Strife, and others. What caught my interest is that one of the psychics claimed to have felt certain things. Another one comes in and actually backs up everything that was said, and it's supposed to be without them communicating. Then we also have this geophysicist who comes in and builds different kind of equipment to help prove things. So I might be wrong here, but I was on board for the realism until I realized that Elizabeth Saint, who is in this, is posing as a scientific mind and is actually a director, writer, and producer on different things. So in the world of things that we're presenting, I was there. The problem is then that I learned this information that it loses me, and then I realized that this is probably more than likely a staged. That was something that does make this a disappointment. If you take it at face value, then it's just for entertainment. I will say is that about the content is that learning that this could be staged does diminish that impact, like I said. This is, unless I misunderstood who was who, there is a heartfelt thing that directors here want to do is help that, getting Alice back in her home and getting her to kind of stay overnight and everything like that. That stuff's all feels very altruistic in that you want to help people. I like that. So there isn't much more to delve into since this is building on the previous setup. There are some dark elements with the psychics believing here. The house is near a cemetery that was used, and that adds a little bit there as well. I do think that the cinematography and framing are good. Both are done professionally. It's a well-made documentary, like a docudrama with what they're doing. The sound design also adds a creepy factor as well. In conclusion, this succeeds as a piece of entertaining paranormal investigation, continuing the story of Jackson with professional cinematography and sound design that effectively builds a creepy atmosphere. The documentary brings in a range of experts from psychics to a geophysicist, adding layers of intriguing claims. However, the revelation that certain scientific figures are actually involved in the production, suggesting staged elements, diminishes the intended impact and realism. This is a follow-up that's well made and maintains a heartfelt goal of helping the homeowner. Viewers must decide whether to engage it as an authentic investigation or simply a polished docudrama. So my rating here, though, I gave this one, much like the other one, it's not as good, but I still give it a 6 out of 10. And then I have 2 episodes here of It, Welcome to Derry. The first one's going to be episode 2, The Thing in the Dark. This is Charlotte and Will navigate the new life in Derry. Ronnie worries about her father's fate. And that's kind of some stuff that adds heart here. And that would be Charlotte is portrayed by Taylor Page. And then Leroy's her husband, portrayed by Jovan Epidito. And then we also have their son, as I'm trying to make sure, Will Hanlon, portrayed by Blake Cameron James. So what I'll go ahead and say here for this episode is I like what they're doing. That's the first thing. I might as well kind of get that out of the way. We see that Will gets bullied already. He makes a semi-friend kind of early here. And this one is Rich Santo, portrayed by Arian S. Cartaya. We see the town is racist. Some good people still. There are a lot of people that are against this Paul Bunyan statue going up there. That was kind of funny. We're seeing a boy get jumped here, and nobody's really helping, but Charlotte does step in. We also learned that she did a lot of stuff for the civil rights movement in the South when they lived there. We also have a great scene here where Ronnie Grogan, who's portrayed by Amanda Christine, now she's worried about her father Hank, who is been arrested for the murder of all the kids in his movie theater. And we see that she has this creepy thing where it's kind of going back that her mother passed away giving birth, and then that's something that the entity plays on. He has some great transitions. I wanted to give credit for that. I feel bad for some of the people here, including Lily Bainbridge, who's portrayed by Clara Stack. Her whole thing here is that she kind of gets bullied by the chief of police, Clint Bowers, portrayed Peter Outerbridge into kind of revealing some things. That's where Hank ends up going into jail. I gave this episode a 7 out of 10. And then we get to learn a little bit interesting stuff here about some of the characters' backstory, and that's going to be episode 3, Now You See It. This one is directed by Andrew Bernstein, and this one, Shaw orders Halloran's aerial search with Leroy and Polly after a disappointing find. Rose meets a tribal meeting about the military in Derry while Ronnie's group tries to photograph and Oxyria. I don't know how to say that name. It's definitely a Spanish thing, and that other kid kind of comes back into play there. I'm going to go ahead and say here some of the people that, like, Leroy is working, like I said, with Polly, and Polly is portrayed by Rudy Mancuso, and then they're actually helping here Dick Halloran, portrayed by Chris Chalk, as he has a special mission here. But we actually get to learn a little bit here, and it's kind of interesting how this happens. So back in 1908 at the carnival, a boy goes into a freak show, and this boy is Francis, who as a little kid is portrayed by, not really finding him on the top of the list, that doesn't matter. The clown in there is done up, there's a clown at this thing that is done up like Pennywise, and then this little boy befriends an American Indian girl. She's scared and tells him not to go into the woods, and then he actually sees a skeleton thing out there. And then it all comes to the thing here is that boy is actually General Francis Shaw, portrayed by James Remar, who's in charge of everything here. And we also get to meet the Indian lady is going to be Rose, portrayed by Kimberly Guerrero. How everything kind of plays in there. It's also kind of funny is there's a character of Taniel, portrayed by Joshua Ojic. He is also in The Long Walk. We also have this Dick actually gets seen by the entity when he goes into the past and everything like that. Thought that was kind of an interesting thing there. There's these kids, including Will, Rich, Ronnie, as well as Lily. They try to capture a picture of it. I love what they do there because that's definitely something that falls in line where I'm not shocked that things don't actually work out there. We also get to see, I believe in this episode, it might be the next one. I think it's actually probably in the next one, but I rather enjoyed this one. We do get to see that the clown might be actually in the crypt and everything. I gave this episode here, episode 3, an 8 out of 10. Rather enjoyed the things that it was doing. And then the last 2 things I'm going to have here are going to be the first 2 episodes of Season 5 of Stranger Things. So this is directed between the Duffer Brothers, Matt and Ross, and then the writers, they also did this with Caitlin Schneiderhan, and this stars Winona Ryder, David Harbour, and Millie Bobby Brown. So this one, November 1987, the gang invades the military to scour the Upside Down for Vecna, but fails to notice a threat lurking closer to home. So this one, Chapter 1, is The Crawl. I love that they set up everything here. We get to hear so much through the character of Robin, who is now hosting a radio station because pretty much everybody from Hawkins has fled. She's, of course, being portrayed by Maya Hawke. And we also learn here that there's a mission to find Vecna, like I was saying. This one is actually, everybody's kind of involved here. We got Joyce Byers, portrayed by Ryder, Jim Hopper, portrayed by Harbour, 11, Brown. We have Mike Wheeler, Wolfin Wolfhard, Dustin Henderson, portrayed by Gatton, Matt Terrazzo. We have Lucas Sinclair by Caleb McLaughlin, Will Byers, Noah Schnapp, Max Mayfield, who is Sadie Sink. She is still in a coma. Nancy Wheeler, Natalia Dyer. We have Jonathan Byers, Charlie Heaton, and Steve Harrington, Joe Carey. And then also kind of helping them a little bit on the side here is Murray Bauman, portrayed by Brent Gelman. I will say, though, is that the Byers are living with the Wheelers, who are Cara Buño, and then her husband, he's not popping up as one of the top people here, but yeah, just kind of wanted to throw there. But then we also get a little bit more here of the little girl who is Nancy Wheeler, and what's kind of interesting there is the fact that she has this imaginary friend that she's talking to. We get introduced there. We figure out she's going to be playing a much bigger part in this season and everything like that. And she's portrayed by Nell Fisher. I gave this first episode a 7.5 out of 10. Then the next one, The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler. And this one is after a vicious attack at the Wheeler home. Mike and Nancy confront a cost of secrecy while Elle and Hopper embark on a rescue mission. And this one actually makes a little bit more sense. We get a little bit more about the Holly character, kind of seeing things there. And then we actually get to see some pretty dark and creepy things here in the Upside Down. There's this definitely thing. I don't want to necessarily kind of say things there, but this one has a much darker feel, and I tend to enjoy that more. I gave this episode an 8.5 out of 10. So that's all I'm going to do here then for my mini reviews. Let me go ahead and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
Let's go back. Can we do that? Can we just do that? When we didn't know. We didn't know any of this.
Where are you?
And for my first feature review here is going to be Keeper. This is from 2025, directed by Osgood Perkins, and then written by Nick Leppard. This is starring Tatiana Maslany, Rossaf Sutherland, and Burkett Turton, while also having in this, as well as supporting cast of Christian Park, Claire Frisian, Eden Weiss, Aaron Boyos, Tess Degenstein, Gina Voltaggio, Glenn Gordon, Logan Pierce, Aaron Tipple, Evelyn Burke, and Ella Viger. This is a body, folk, monster, psychological, supernatural horror tragedy film that is from a co-production of the United States and Canada. This is currently sitting on a 5.9 on IMDb and a 2.6 on Letterboxd for a synopsis. A romantic anniversary trip to a secluded cabin turns sinister when a dark presence reveals itself, forcing a couple to confront the property's haunting past. So this is one I was intrigued to see. It popped on my radar earlier this year when I saw that our director Perkins, I saw The Monkey. I believe that this was a teaser at the end of it, which I more than likely skipped because I don't watch trailers. So when I was doing my featured notes, that's where I learned about this one for sure. So it was also interesting to be working with Maslany again, who stars in this as well. She also was in The Monkey. I'll be honest, outside of her and hearing a couple of friends enjoying this ahead of me seeing it, I came in blind. Then to start with some featured notes, starting with our director here, Perkins. He has directed 6 feature films and 1 short. I've seen all of his features now, and they're all in horror. Adam McCarthy is an assistant director. He was brought up with The Monkey as well, so he has 10 overall films. I've seen 3 for 30%. He's done 4 in the genre. I have not seen Hypnotic as of yet, but I've seen 75% of his horror works. Then there's also, this was written by Leppard. He has done this for 2 movies. His other one is on my list here to check out here in December here soon, of Dangerous Animals. Now, Maslany, I've been brought up, like I said, for The Monkey. I've seen 7 of her 43 motion pictures. She has 11 shorts as well. Not horror, I've seen Eastern Promises, She-Hulk, that show, and then The Vow. In genre, she has 6, and I've seen 4. I have seen Diary of the Dead and Stir of Echoes 2, The Homecoming. I have not seen Ginger Snaps 2, Unleashed, or The Messengers. Then we have Sutherland. He's been in 28 features and 2 shorts. I've seen him in 4 works. Not horror would be Timeline. He has 7 in genre. I've seen 3. He was also in Possessor and Orphan First Kill. I have not seen The Retreat, Hellions, Dead Before Dawn, or Trench 11. Now, fun fact, he's the half-brother to Kiefer and the son of Donald Sutherland. Lastly, I'll bring up Turton. He has been in 30 films and 4 shorts. I've seen him in 4. Not horror, he was in Wrath of the Titans. I've also would consider Kingdom Hospital to be in genre, at least very close to it. Officially, he has 6 that are horror. I've seen this in Blade Trinity. I have not seen Ricky 6, Strange Frequency, Cut, Shoot, Kill, or Unnatural Causes. All right, that should be enough. Let's get into this movie here. We get an interesting opening. We have flashes of various women. There are like Julia, portrayed by Boyes. There is Frances, portrayed by Voltaggio. There is Ada, portrayed by Frisian, and Leslie by Park, and then a peasant girl portrayed by Burke. We aren't given much context outside seeing them, and then they all come from different eras. Now, things seem to turn dark when they all seem to get angry at the end of this sequence. I'll leave that here, as this does come up periodically in nightmares later. So then it shifts to Liz, portrayed by Maslany, as she's talking to her friend. She reveals that she's doing a trip from the synopsis. Her friend is concerned. It sounds like despite them being together that time that they have, there's a lot of unknowns. They still are going to head to the cabin, and this would be Liz with Malcolm Westbridge, portrayed by Sutherland. Now, he ends up, showing her around. There's also a box that contains a chocolate cake. Now, their night gets interrupted by Malcolm's cousin of Darren, portrayed by Turton. He shows up with Minka, portrayed by Weiss. Now, she's foreign, being somewhere from Eastern Europe, and she doesn't really speak English all that well. Malcolm does what he can to rush them out so he can be alone with Liz. Now, she wants to get intimate, but at first insists that she try some of this chocolate cake. Things get odd from here. Liz wakes up in the middle of the night, not feeling well. She's drawn back to the cake, and she eats the rest of it. There seems to be this entity lurking within the house. It is watching Liz. We also see Minka getting fed up the next morning and trying to get an Uber, and it is attacked by something in the woods. To complicate things further, Malcolm tells Liz that he has to go back to the city to take care of a patient who's in a coma. She was supposed to wake up. Sounds like she didn't. So Liz assumes there's something more going on here. She gives a call to her friend who believes the same thing. Now, the truth is even more terrifying than what her friend kind of threw out there. So let's leave my recap direction of the character. I want to start is by saying that this one, the more that I sit with it, the more that I like it. When I finally settled and write my thoughts, there were little things that I thought back on, and it clicked why certain things were said or we saw certain reactions. I'm going to tread lightly to not spoil things while I still try to flesh out my thoughts a little bit more. I want to start with this premise. It's kind of basic, but it's a familiar story centered on a couple that knows enough about each other for them to take a trip that gets planned, yet they still have these secrets. And I mean, to be honest, there's even times when people have been together for a long time, even years, and they still have secrets between each other. This gets subtly introduced when Liz mentions on the phone that she doesn't know if he wants children. I think this is a crucial detail here for people that are dating in their 30s. The remote wooded setting amplifies a built-in claustrophobia and fear, establishing an appreciated tone that the cinematography captures successfully. Let me then look at our two leads here, starting with Liz. She is at risk by going to Malcolm's cabin. I appreciate that she's a modern woman who stands up for herself and fights back, a role that Maslany excels at. However, she still ignores clear red flags, partly due to Malcolm's explanations. Like her, I've been in bad situations just trying to be polite. The growing fear that she discovers more information effectively builds suspense. Now, to build off that sentiment, when I heard that Malcolm bring up that his patient needs to be seen, I believed him. What is strategic there gets brought up earlier. He then references it when he goes to leave. There are little responses that are dropped later that didn't click until getting my thoughts down that gave me empathy. His reaction also makes more sense now why as well. Sutherland does a good job at seeming like this nice guy while also harboring secrets. Now, the last thing to go into to develop here is referencing the women that we saw through these dreams and flashbacks. I made sure to remember that as I knew it would have to play in later, what I love is that Liz's biggest fear is that he's a married man with a family and that she's the other woman. She finds a picture, and that is the evidence she needs to fight back with him. The deeper we get in the story, the more that these flashes make even more sense, especially little details. I did appreciate the slow reveal of the story. I think this should be enough for that. Let me go over to the filmmaking. Cinematography effectively captures the isolated setting, enhancing the haunted house atmosphere, especially when Liz is alone. The framing light and shadows are used here are excellent. The non-cheesy jump scares and practical effects were good, as this has some functional CGI that enhanced the action. The unsettling music was great for ramping up tension. This is definitely a well-made movie that I expect seeing that Perkins was attached to it. So all that's left then before some trivia is going to be the acting performances. I've already said that Maslany and Sutherland are good as our leads. Turton works as his lecherous cousin. I like that Malcolm says that he used to be nice, and as time went on, he's become more what we have here. It makes even more sense with things that we learn later. Vice works in this minor role. The women who we see in these flashes are solid as well. The credit for the odd things that we get to see at the climax, that made me uncomfortable, and I loved it, and I think the acting here is pretty great across the board, if I'm going to be honest. I'll go ahead and there's a lot of trivia that keeps repeating the same thing, but the teaser trailer for Keeper appeared at the end of The Monkey. Perkins described the movie as a critique of disgusting maleness, employing folk horror visuals to explore patriarchy, misogyny, and toxic masculinity. Perkins cited The Shining and A Woman Under the Influence as stylistic touchstones, explaining that relationship dynamics and emotional instability drive this version of horror rather than jump scares. The film's marketing team intentionally mirrored the cryptic and unnerving style of Longlegs, including an entitled teaser ending with the line, "You're not right for this place." During the 2023 Hollywood strike, Perkins used the downtime to conceptualize Keeper as a way to keep his team working while other productions were stalled. Perkins emphasizes that Keeper is meant to feel markedly different in tone and structure from Longlegs and The Monkey, viewing each of his recent horror films as separate experiences. Several domestic symbols of comfort, such as a boxed cake and jars of honey, are repurposed in the film's visual language to become mythic, grotesque touch points in the story. So in conclusion, this is effectively crafted horror film that that benefits from Perkins' direction and Leopard's slow burn script. The film excels in building dread through isolated setting and excellent cinematography, which uses light and shadow to create genuinely haunting atmosphere. Maslany and Sutherland deliver strong performances, navigating the unsettling secrets that underpin their relationship. While the film's premise about a couple's concealed truce is familiar, the integration of dreams, flashbacks, and terrifying history gives a unique depth, ensuring that the film uncomfortably revelations land with great impact. This is a well-made, tense, and thought-provoking entry into the genre. So my rating here for Keeper, I gave this one an 8 out of 10. I'm not going to do a spoiler section. This one's a little bit too new. I know a lot of people haven't had a chance to see it yet. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is get you over to the trailer of my second featured review. And for my second feature review is going to be Winterbeast from 1992, written and directed by Christopher Theus. This is starring Tim R. Morgan, Mike Magri, and Charles Madchak, something like that. And then we also have Bob Harlow, Lisa Breer, Dory Mae Kelly, David Mika, Bill McLeod, Chris Lynch, Chris Waldron, Sabine Segacelli, Mike Tipping, Bob Doucette, Virginia Connors, Tracy Kennedy, Regina Birch, Jennifer Dallas, and Nancy Shamilgas. This is an action drama fantasy horror film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 4.5 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd, or synopsis being: people are being killed off near a popular mountain lodge, with a legend claiming that the mountain is haunted by a deadly Native American demonic curse, or American Indian demonic curse. So now this is a film that I know about thanks to podcasts. It was one that I knew the name and that it was a wild creature feature. What is funny is that I decided to check this out for my winter-themed horror movies. Interestingly, this takes place in the fall and there isn't any snow, so it's not even winter. So since it takes place on a mountain, it still has that cold feel. So let me go ahead and do some feature notes. This is going to be extremely short. We start with the director of Theus. This is his only feature film. Also wrote the screenplay, came up with the story. This, again, is our only credits in both of those. To the cast, Morgan, Magri, and Majek. This is their only feature film they've ever done, and the only credit and everything like that. So yeah, that's that. So then, let's jump in the movie, and we start off with a surreal scene where a police officer comes into a room and asks a question. This turns out to be a nightmare. We're following a ranger here of Sergeant Bill Whitman, portrayed by Morgan. He is working with Stillman, portrayed by Magri. One of the other rangers has gone missing, so Bill is starting his investigation. Near where they went missing, there's a lodge. That's from the synopsis. They stop in later that night and talk with the owner of Dave Sheldon, portrayed by Harlow. He gets upset when he learns that Bill wants to stop people from going hiking and on the mountain and everything like that, and it's going to kill his business if that happens. Then these two get help from Charlie Perkins, portrayed by Mechka. He runs a local store and he knows about the local legends. We have Barbara, portrayed by Kelly, works for Charlie, and she also helps out where she can. Then we also have another ranger here of Bradford, portrayed by Breer. Now, we then get to see these creatures and monsters roam in the woods. A woman getting ready for bed is attacked. There's also a couple of hikers and Ranger Bradford who encounter different things. Charlie believes it's the local American Indian lore about these totems that are guarding a gateway to hell. Bill continues to try to shut down the trails, but Dave won't hear anything about it. There's more going on the surface here, and we need to figure things out before it is too late. Well, we don't. These characters need to, or there's going to be more people getting hurt. So that's really my recap and on the characters. What I want to start is by saying this is impressive for the budget that it had. I'm not saying it's great. There are things that hinder this, and its premise is simple. Borrowing heavily from Jaws, where we have, something roaming the area. The idea that if you bring up anything too much before anything is actually proven, it'll hurt business. Capitalism is forcing people to be put at risk. I do appreciate that commentary, even if it isn't original. Now that I set that up, I did want to say that I love the premise. We have this small town nestled on a mountain in the woods. There are things in the area like that. You added in the American Indian lore, even though my limited knowledge is that they don't believe in hell. It could also be an easy buzzword to kind of use to get people up to speed without, trying to use too much words. There are evil spirits, so I won't hold it against the movie. I know that even the Indians thought that way. We have some solid elements here. So I'm not going to spoil things, but I'll briefly just kind of touch on Dave and his lodge. I've already said that he comes off like the mayor from Jaws. That's an easy trope to use. Something interesting, and I'll bring this back up, is that he says his father owned this lodge, as is his father before that. There's this creepy scene that we get later on that helps abridge things, in my opinion. A bit more there would have been helpful, but I like the implications that we do get. I'll then go over there to filmmaking. The highlight here is the charm, albeit imperfect, stop-motion animation used for the numerous monsters, including the solid-looking Winterbeast portrayed by Linji. Now, the setting was captured well, and the cinematography and framing were serviceable. The synthwave-like music is a sweet spot, even though the dialogue has some sound quality issues at times. Something else I have issues with would be the editing. Things are all over the place, so it does almost give it a surreal feel. I'm guessing it's more of just kind of amateur work and trying to throw things together like they did, so it is what it is. All stuff that I go into would be the acting performances. This is a regional independent film, so I'm not going to come down too hard. Morgan is solid as our lead. There are times where it feels like he might be reading his lines off a card. I still believe enough that he's a ranger. Magri is funny as this party guy who works along with Bill. I like Majka as our expert. Harlow is this odd lodge owner, is good. He's really weird, and I like how at first he just seems like a guy not wanting his business to die. There's a little bit more sinister things going on there. I'd say Breer, Kelly, and the rest of the cast were fine. Lengi also works here as our Winterbeast, who works, to round out this for what was needed there as well. So just a little bit of trivia. This is probably going to be very quick here, but the totem monster and the skeleton head that rips out the man's stomach are both props taken from the Dokken music video Burning Like a Flame. Winterbeast began production in 1985. Producer Mark Frizzle thought it would take a weekend to finish. It took way longer. By 1989, Frizzle pulled the plug. In 92, he revisited the abandoned work and completed it on a half-inch tape. It was originally shot on a mixture of 16mm and Super 8. The footage shot in 1982 only was done in 2 days, so that makes sense why he thought that was going to be the case. Originally, the filmmakers imagined the Winterbeast to be stop-motion creature. This became a guy in a costume, of which some footage was shot. When the film fell apart, Frizzle had a little stop-motion bits between gigs on his day job at Olive Jar Animation to fill in the missing monster footage. That makes a whole lot of sense. Riff by Mystery Science Theater 3000 alums Kevin Murphy, Michael J. Nelson, and Bill Corbett for the Riff Tracks brand. The vintage men's magazine, read by two characters early on, is Rogue Magazine, December 1956. So in conclusion, this is a wild ride that's hampered by its low-budget constraints, but elevated by sheer ambition and unique charm. The premise is strong, leaning into creature feature tropes with a Jaws-like conflict and interesting local lore. While the technical execution, especially the sound design and editing, can be amateur, this wins over viewers, in my opinion, with its endearing stop-motion creature effects and serviceable acting performances. This is not a polished horror masterpiece, but it's a memorable, quirky piece of regional cinema that deserves a watch for fans of bizarre, independent genre films. So like I said, this is going to be a little bit shorter review, not a whole lot more to go into. It's just kind of a fun one to kind of turn off your brain, have some drinks, and just kind of roll with it. So my rating, though, for Winterbeast, I give a 5.5 out of 10. So that's all I have here, then, for this review. I'm not going to do spoilers or anything like that. Let me get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that's going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the Pod Nation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And then for my next episode, it's going to be another one of these winter year-end roundup. As the 2 featured reviews I'm going to have, it's going to be Liverleaf is going to be the one that, I'm not sure what year this is. I did find this is supposed to be a winter-based kind of horror movie, so that'll be one. And I believe I'm going to be watching Match as the 2 that I'm going to have my featured reviews over there. And then I think Howling New Moon Rising is going to be my Voyage to the Fives rewatch. I need to double check that one is actually from 1995. And then I'll also have, more mini reviews of things that are going to be 2025 releases, as well as, checking out some ones to revisit. I'll also watch some new ones, things like that. So I think that's all I need to say here, except that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending